Hey folks, Phil Gallagher here for Daily D&D. If I can count, then this one is supposed to air on Christmas. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, EO Saturnalia, whatever holiday you're celebrating at this time of the year, you know. Even if it's something old school, like, just a winter solstice or something. I hope it's going well. We got an Aether Vial for Christmas. That is an acceptable Christmas present. Oh no, is opponent going to have a Grizzle Daddy? Nope. 100% will be jamming this Thalia into whatever my opponent has going on this turn. I also think my opponent's a Storm player. I feel like I recognize their name. Ooh, no, maybe Shadow, actually. Shadow play Badland or Bloodstained Mire, though? One Bloodstained Mire. Okay, if this is Storm, I need to jam this Thalia here. If this is Death Shadow and they don't Thoughtseize me, it's so much better to wait on this Thalia and just like hold up a Source of Plowshares instead. I'm going to take a risk here and just pass the turn. A Thoughtseize taking this Thalia really sucks. And my opponent being Storm would really suck too. But if my opponent is some Delver variant, I will just be so happy to have his Thalia around still. Yeah, sure. We're going to do a play that I like a lot here. And that's Tick Vial up. Put in a Thalia. And then we can Swords of Plowshares the Arcanist without any fear of something like, say, Force of Will mucking with us. Boo, opponent not giving me the opportunity to Flicker Wisp and do something cool. So it looks like my opponent is on a Grixis Shadow list. I am going to tick up this vial. Ticking up the vial is actually kind of medium. Because we really want to leave it on 2 in this build. We need gas. We need like a hawk, a piece of equipment, a Stoneforge, a recruiter, something like that before this happens. Crap. Oh man, my opponent has another piece of removal here. And they get to like leave this bolt in the yard, or they get to start cantripping instead. That's devastating for me. Alright, this one is going to slip away. I don't think I have that many draws to go and get back in this game. And it might seem silly to say that because my opponent is just like going to get the cantrip. But every turn that this thing just sticks around and cantrips, it lets them build their hand to beat my outs. So for example, a Force of Virtue and Squadron Hawk pairing could pretty easily muck with what's on the board. But, a Force of Will that, effectively would stop my 4-for-1 from resolving probably puts me out of range of winning this game. We're still in the attack step. Oh, okay. Sure. I do not think that is worth a Force of Will. You've already bought so much tempo. Yeah, I would have saved that for an actual threat. I don't have one. But I don't think that was a great use of their mana. Alright. Yeah. If I brick on my next draw, I am just going to concede. Save my time here. Because now something like Swords to Plowshares isn't going to be good enough either. And I have a 3/1 flyer that's probably 1 or 2 turns away from coming down. Like, Batterskull Germ Token would just get Fatal pushed. Or my opponent could just start flying over it, too. Great. Yeah. Alright. No, not turn off auto yields. Concede game. Alright. So, now that. Ballista seems good. Path seems good. Council's Judgment seems fine. Sanctum Prelate is awkward, but I might consider it. We'll kind of think about my build a little bit and figure out what I want to do. Crusaders aren't great against Lightning Bolt. Probably start there. Might want to, like, trim a Force of Virtue. Yeah, I just feel so weird about boarding with this deck because you're starting with 3 fewer creatures than normal. So every time you take out a creature, you're just lowering your threat density a lot. So I'm fine with taking out 2 creatures at the very least because we're pulling 2 Mirror Crusaders. And we get another creature in here by pulling out a Force of Virtue. But I think it gets trickier from here. What do I do? Trim one of those and trim a Thalia to make numbers work? That leaves me at 21 creatures. So I feel pretty good about these Squadron Hawk builds in these Game 1 scenarios, but I'm super unsure about my sideboarding. So I can consider casting a Force of Virtue this turn, but if I wanted to do so, I should have done so in my opponent's upkeep. The reason why I'm talking about that is because I'm playing Thalia now, which prices me out of being able to Force a Virtue on my opponent's turn. If they were on the play and they could have like curved into Plague Engineer, that's something that I would have needed to consider a little bit more seriously. I am going to play a Stoneforge this turn. And this is going to allow me to leave up Force of Virtue in case my opponent Plague Engineers. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's like he's a psychic. Nope. Nope. So we're probably going to Sanctum Prelate on 1 on my turn, which will presumably show off most of the rest of my opponent's hand, and then we'll go for a sword afterwards to take over the game. And this gets to just resolve too. So now we've really mitigated the damage that, say, an Arcanist or a Young Pyromancer could do to us. Okay, that's some bullshit. I dislike that a lot. You're a Grixis deck. You're not supposed to be able to answer that. Waste my Caracas. Waste my Caracas. Dang it. Awkward, but acceptable. Don't daze me. So that makes me think that they do have an answer to this Sanctum Prelate, but I'm wondering what that could be. They can't push, they can't bolt, they can't block with Brazen Borrower. So it must be a Braid. Accordingly, I don't think I want to play into that. So I have to think through the iterations here. If it's a Braid, are they going to braid my Sword or my Sanctum Prelate? Probably my Sanctum Prelate. Then I can Swords to Plowshares the Plague Engineer and be totally fine with where my resources are at. I can't just take an attack in with a Sanctum Prelate, or like they just flash in the Brazen Borrower and block. Alright. I'm gonna go ahead and call this. Like, if they have it, they have it. Alright, they do have it. Slightly surprised that it did go on the sword and not the prelate. Especially given that. I'm going to do something that might look a little weird. But I think I'm going to go ahead and pitch cast Force of Virtue, so that I have the possibility of playing a Walking Ballista for X equals 2 and keeping it around after I do something like double shoot Plague Engineer. And I think it's very close which one of these cards I want to exile. The Swords to Plowshares is useless right now, but becomes so important if my opponent takes the Prelate off the table that I think I am going to pitch the Thalia. Alright, force, pitch, force there. Not too surprised about that. Well, super rewarded by my play, I guess. I think I'm going to go ahead and wait a turn, because I'd really like to put one counter on this Walking Ballista so I can trade it for Plague Engineer and the Brazen Borrower that's coming. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take the 3 damage here. You know, my opponent's doing a really good job of playing around the Sanctum Prelate by drawing all of the creatures in their deck. I'm a little frustrated by that. So this block is free. I can block here and then shoot down the Plague Engineer. Alright, my 4th land is a little later than I'd like it, but it's here. So now that the Plague Engineer is gone, I can go ahead and deploy this Thalia. We can't attack with that Prelate. The Brazen Borrower still presents a threat. That's kind of what I was hoping for. So I guess the question is, am I going to just attack with the Batterskull Germ, gain 4, and then equip? Or am I going to attack in with a Thalia and try to gain 6 this turn? If I try to gain 6 and my opponent has an Abrade, it's pretty devastating. But I think if they had a Abrade, they would have just snapped that off already. So let's swing for the fences. I think that connection means that I now have enough of a buffer that my opponent can't win. Yeah, there we go. So now that I know my opponent has Gurmags as well, do I want to put Crusaders in the deck to give myself more outs to that? "21 creatures currently. We saw Force of Virtues being important for Plague Engineer reasons. I might be willing to go like -1 of those, +1 of those, and maybe on the draw my Thalias become worse. Like they're just notably worse against Plague Engineer when my opponent is on the draw. And this would mitigate how much damage 1 on human will do to me. I'll be slowing down my deck a lot if I do this. And making myself worse against Young Pyromancer. We'll keep some in there. I might have to ask XJ Cloud how he sideboards with this deck. Because I'm super unsure. I'm going to keep this hand. I don't really love this hand, but I also don't think it's bad enough to throw back. So we're starting on a Vial, which is, an awesome thing that requires a response from our opponent, but we don't have an early removal spell, we don't have an early threat. And if the vial doesn't resolve so that we can like be porting my opponent, I'm going to feel pretty awkward this game about like what to do with my mana in the opening turns. That's a fantastic draw and solves a lot of my complaints with this hand. I don't mind my opponent taking this setup time here. Especially if they don't just like play Delver now. Okay, they did play Delver now. I was pretty tempted to just port there. You got like a click or something over there? That doesn't work the way you think it does. I could still put in a 1-drop, but I don't have a 1-drop. So we'll pretend that it works the way you think it does. Ooh, am I wasting my opponent? I kind of just want to play Stoneforge and redeploy Vial, honestly. Like, playing Council's Judgment around a daze on a future turn is probably more important than taking my opponent off of a mana source here. Yeah, okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's get the Sword of Fire and Ice. It's more hard castable in the immediate future. And since my opponent hasn't like used all of their mana every turn or everything, I don't necessarily think that they have Oh. Sorry, I do kind of think they have spot removal. Alright, or they drew that for the turn. That is a very aggressive Abrade. A 100% yes. Now I need to think about this card. So I can waste them off of a mana source and then play Sword of Fire and Ice around Daze next turn. Or if I don't waste them, I can play Sword of Fire and Ice and attempt an equip next turn. I do have this Brazen Borrower to go and think about. And I think that's more optimal. My opponent can still Plague Engineer on Elemental if they have one. And it'll suck. But I guess I could play that around like a Pierce. Sure. Boo. My opponent's hellbent. I kind of have the inevitability right now. I think I want to take a turn to just like take this young pyromancer off the table. I'll port them and then go for Flicker Wisp equip next turn, giving them like their turn has to be find. Well, okay, so that's interesting. If I just play out Flicker Wisp, so this is happening no matter what. If I play out Flicker Wisp, I can flicker a land. I can port them. I can wasteland and make it so they have to find another lightning bolt or a braid when there's already 2 in the graveyard. That actually is probably better. So if they draw a blank this turn, they're in a lot of trouble. Show me bolt. Nope. GG. No, this is not literally game over, right? Like, they can draw on a braid or something like that and get back in here. But, like, given the resources that I know they have currently, this is... this is devastating for them. Ooh. Got some? Kind of feels like he got something. Sure. I will sacrifice a creature. D&T having the ability to like have an endgame draw 3 is pretty silly. All 3 of those. There we go. So I don't really intend on porting my opponent, but I don't need to tap that yet. I can still leave myself with 2 white available. Note that I'm equipping my Thalia here, not my Squadron Hawk, because I am totally fine trading Squadron Hawk for the second half of Brazen Borrower. I'd rather push that extra point of damage through and protect my Thalia from future removal. The other thing that this does is that if my opponent has a removal spell and uses it on the Thalia, in response, I can then equip to the Squadron Hawk and also play my Aether Vial post-combat. Am I gonna kill this elemental? Nah, let's send it to the dome. So I think I'm going to value porting my opponent off of a black source for Plague Engineer on Bird, rather than like just play out another threat. All right. The Thalia alone represents lethal. Okay, Abrade the Sword is fine. So we'll probably see an elemental jump block here. So I have some choices here. I can double port my opponent, or I can just play this Batterskull. I don't really know how they beat that. I think I just want to be able to go wide of my opponent next turn, so I think sticking the extra body's better. You know, say like I double port them off of this and they just, I don't know, drop Pyroclasm or something. I don't know. Batterskull seems good. Happy holidays, folks. Hope you're enjoying it. Squawks are 3-0, despite the fact that I have no idea what I'm doing in terms of sideboarding with this build. So let's keep it up.